They used to call me K9, a machine, trained to obey, to bite. No hesitation. But then, one afternoon in the park, he looked at me and said a name I hadn't heard in years. Rusty. Just one word. I stopped in my tracks. And in that moment, everything began again. They say we're born with it. The instinct, the nose for danger, the ear that twitches when something's not right. But that's not what I remember first. I remember warmth, a heavy arm around me, a voice that rasped and chuckled even when the sun burned high over the sand, a hand that never shook unless it was brushing dirt off my ears. That was long ago, before the badge, before the leash. Back then my name wasn't Rex, it was Rusty. I didn't understand names, not really, but I knew that voice. It belonged to him, Hank Doyle. He was my handler, my brother, my reason. I was just a pup when they paired me with him. I still chewed everything in sight. I didn't know the difference between a rock and a grenade pin, but he was patient. He never yelled, never raised a hand. He'd crouch down to my level and say, "You're going to be something, Rusty. I feel it." And I wanted to be something. For him. The desert was unforgiving. Heat by day, silence by night. The air was thick with fear most days, but not when I was with Hank. We patrolled back roads, alleyways, market stalls, dusty compounds. I smelled so many scents back then. Oil, sweat, gunpowder, blood, too much blood. But Hank, he smelled like cedar and black coffee and old denim, like home. That was all before the blast. I don't remember it clearly, just the sound, the fire, the way the earth lifted under my paws and threw me against a wall. I couldn't hear for days. I howled in the darkness of a field tent, looking for Hank. No one answered me in words I knew. They fed me, yes, patched me up, called me lucky, survivor, asset. But Hank never came. Then, one day, a new man clipped a leash to my collar. He had a badge, a voice like ice, and called me by a different name. Rex. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. Somewhere in that place between memory and instinct, I still believed Hank would find me, that one day I'd hear his voice again. Years passed. My world became concrete streets, police SUVs, barking radios, and tense human shoulders. I chased suspects, sniffed out hidden weapons, stood at parades, posed for press photos. Children reached for my ears, officers slapped my side and called me good boy. I never growled, never flinched. I did everything right. Because deep down I thought, maybe if I do well enough, they'll find him. Maybe that's what this is. A test. A waiting room. My new handler was Officer Connor Blake. Young, sharp-jawed, with a voice like steel nails. He wasn't cruel. Just all business. He treated me like a machine that barked on command. And in a way, that's what I had become. Still, at night, when he unbuckled the vest and I curled into the corner of my crate, I would let myself drift. I'd dream of Hank, of the old tent, of the sand under our boots. Sometimes I could still feel his calloused hand behind my ear, and the way his breath stilled when danger was near. Then, one afternoon, we got the call. It was supposed to be routine. Suspicious male, seated alone near the playground. Code 52. No immediate threat, just caution. But the tone in Connor's voice as we arrived was taut. Something about the scene unsettled him. I followed his gaze. A worn-looking man, hunched on a park bench. His hands clutched a duffel bag like it held his last possession. His coat was too big, his shoes mismatched. Kids squealed nearby on the jungle gym, their parents watching from picnic blankets. The man didn't move. He just stared at the grass. Connor approached him with one hand resting near his holster. I sat, eyes locked, body alert. Ready. The man looked up, and for a split second, something shifted in my chest. A strange flutter, like recognition brushing the edge of a scent trail. "Sir," Connor said, "what's in the bag?" The man didn't answer. He tried to rise, knees buckling beneath him. He pressed a hand to his ribs, wincing. I'm just resting," he mumbled. Connor didn't buy it. He radioed backup, called for my deployment. The air changed. Tension swept through the park like wind through dry leaves. Mothers gathered their children. Joggers slowed, then turned away. I could feel it in Connor's grip on the leash. "Let's go," he muttered to me. "Be ready." I stood, shoulders square, ears sharp, eyes on target. The old man looked up again. This time, he met my gaze, directly, and I froze. His eyes weren't afraid. They weren't angry. They were tired, soft, familiar. He raised a hand, not to strike, not to defend, but to greet. Connor shouted, louder now, "Show us the bag!" The man didn't. His lips moved, just barely. I heard it, clear as a bell, though no one else seemed to. "Rusty." My name. Not the one printed on my vest, not the one barked at training drills or muttered over walkie-talkies. My name. I didn't move. Couldn't. My legs felt rooted to the earth. "Go," Connor commanded. And I leapt, because that was the rule. But halfway through the air, something inside me buckled. A memory. A scent. 1,000 whispered words from long ago. I didn't bite. I didn't growl. I stopped, skidded, ears back, whimpering. The man reached again, whispering, "Rusty, it's me." And my heart, that old, trained, obedient heart, cracked wide open. He was supposed to be gone, dead, lost in smoke and fire. But he wasn't. He was right there, my home, my beginning, Hank, and I remembered. I stood there, frozen. Not because I didn't understand the command. I understood it perfectly. Go. It's one word, clipped and sharp, the kind of word that always gets a response from dogs like me. It means run. It means force. It means compliance. But all I could hear was another word. Soft, fragile, almost broken. Rusty. That name hadn't touched my ears in years. It wasn't supposed to. That part of me had been left behind in another place, another life, with someone I thought I'd never see again. Yet here he was. Hank didn't look the same. His face was weathered, older, and worn in ways that went deeper than age. His clothes were too big on his thin frame. His eyes, though, those were still his. Pale blue and steady, even when the rest of the world didn't make sense. I didn't move. Behind me, I could feel the tension radiating off Connor, like heat from asphalt. I heard his boots shifting, the subtle click of his fingers tightening on the leash. But I couldn't take my eyes off the man in front of me. Not anymore. He said my name again. That name. The one from before I was Rex. The one whispered in a dusty tent in Kandahar. The one called out when no one else was around. When it was just him and me. "Rusty, buddy. You remember?" His voice cracked like an old floorboard under weight. I inched forward, just slightly. My ears perked up. My nose caught more of that scent. Not just dirt and sweat, but smoke, tobacco, leather, and something beneath it all. Grief. Connor barked, louder now. "Rex, back. What are you doing?" I didn't move. I couldn't. There was something happening inside me. Something deep and strange, like a river starting to thaw after a long, hard winter. My muscles tensed, but not from fear, from recognition. The man slowly raised his hand, palm outward, like he used to do during our training sessions, back when I was still learning the difference between stay and come. "Rusty." His voice trembled. "It's me. It's Hank." The world got quiet. Like real quiet. The kind of quiet you only hear in a moment so big it sucks the sound right out of everything else. No more radio chatter. No kids laughing in the distance. No barking orders. Just the wind brushing leaves and that single word echoing inside my chest. Hank. My mind, trained to recall commands and track scents across miles, had kept that name buried for years. But now, it came flooding back. Not in pieces, but in full color. I remembered the heat of the desert under our boots. The night we slept under a broken roof while mortars screamed in the distance. The time he pulled shrapnel from my shoulder with his bare hands, whispering, "I've got you, Rusty. I've got you." How could I ever forget? But I had. Or maybe I'd been forced to. The last day we were together, everything went wrong. The explosion had ripped through our convoy like a hammer through glass. I'd been thrown. When I came to, I couldn't hear or smell right, just pain and confusion. I searched for him. Barked until my throat went raw, but no one brought him. They told me he didn't make it. They said, "He's gone, buddy. He's gone." And I believed them. I had to. I was reassigned, retrained, given a new handler, a new name, a new life. But it had never fit right. Now here he was, sitting on a park bench with a duffel bag between his feet and his heart wide open, calling my name like it had never left his lips. Connor pulled on the leash again, snapping me out of it. "Rex, heal. You're malfunctioning." That word stung. Malfunctioning. I wasn't a machine. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back at Connor. His face was a mix of confusion and rising frustration. I could see it, the doubt creeping in. This wasn't how the scene was supposed to go. I turned back to Hank. He opened the duffel bag slowly. Inside were nothing dangerous. A threadbare jacket, a torn photo, a worn leather leash with a faded brass tag. The kind you'd find on a dog who hadn't worn it in years. My leash. The one he used when I was still learning to walk beside him. It still had my old tag. The one with Rusty Unit 419 etched into it. He pulled it out and held it up with shaky fingers. "You remember this, don't you, boy?" he asked, voice catching. "They told me you didn't make it either. I looked. I swear I looked. But I wasn't right in the head. They didn't believe me when I said I had a dog. No one believed me." I stepped forward again. Slowly. No growl. No tension. Just me. And the man who'd given me my first command, my first home, my first purpose. Connor barked into his radio. "I need immediate backup at Mill Creek. My K9 unit is not responding to orders. We've got an unstable civilian, possibly suffering from mental illness. Might be PTSD. But I wasn't listening to Connor anymore. I walked up to Hank. He dropped the leash and let his hands fall to his lap, I sniffed his jacket, his fingers, his face, and I remembered everything. He reached up and gently placed his hand behind my ear, in the exact spot he used to scratch when we both made it through another mission alive. His touch was lighter now, more fragile, but it was him. "I missed you, Rusty," he whispered. I whined, not in fear, but in relief. Then, without thinking, I sat down beside him, curled my body against his legs, and rested my head in his lap. It was instinct, but not the kind they teach in training. It was something older, deeper, real. Connor stopped yelling. The other officers arrived, weapons drawn, hands hovering over sidearms, but no one moved. The park had gone still. A kid nearby said, "The dog's not biting him. He's hugging him." Someone else gasped. I didn't move, because I wasn't Rex anymore. I was Rusty, and I was home. I wish I could tell you I understood it all right then, that the moment I looked into Hank's eyes, everything became clear. But it wasn't that simple. Recognition doesn't hit you like a flash of lightning. It's more like a slow tide, rising inch by inch, until suddenly you're drowning in it. What caught me first wasn't his voice, or even the name Rusty. It was the look. It wasn't fear. That's what I was trained to look for. Twitching eyes, tightened jaws, clenched fists. Indicators of resistance, danger, threat. But this wasn't any of those. His eyes were soft, not weak, just gentle and tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a bad night's sleep, but from carrying too many years on your back. The kind of tired you get when no one believes your story anymore. When the world keeps going and you've been left behind. I knew that look. I'd seen it once before, not on a suspect, not on an enemy, on a soldier. We were clearing a compound near Kunduz, dust everywhere, the air choked with gun oil and burnt rubber. A young Marine had been trapped in a collapsed hallway, pinned under rubble. His eyes had that same look, not pain, not even panic, just quiet acceptance, like he'd already said goodbye to everything he loved. Hank had dug him out with bare hands, didn't stop for breath, didn't wait for orders, just kept moving concrete, bloodied his knuckles, tore the skin from his palms. And when he finally got to him, the kid looked up and whispered, "I thought no one was coming." And Hank said, "We don't leave our own." That's the man who sat in front of me now, trembling on a bench in a city park, talking to me like I was his only anchor left. And somehow, in that moment, Connor was still on the radio. "We've got a situation," he said, his voice clipped. K9 unit is showing signs of confusion. Subject may be emotionally manipulating the animal, requesting psychiatric support and senior command. Emotionally manipulating. I suppose that's what it looked like from the outside. A homeless man talking to a police dog like he was an old friend, and the dog, me, not responding the way he was trained to, not obeying, not attacking, just sitting, leaning in, whining softly like a puppy who had finally found something he didn't even know he was missing. The crowd around us had grown. Joggers slowed to a stop. Parents held their children back, unsure whether to run or watch. Phones came out. I heard the beeps and clicks of recordings beginning, but no one moved, and neither did I. Hank lifted the leash again, the old one, cracked and stiff, with my nameplate still attached. He rubbed his thumb over the brass tag. "They said you were gone," he murmured. They told me after the explosion that nothing made it out, that you were buried, but I swore I heard you barking. I swore. His voice broke. I inched closer. He didn't flinch. He just let the leash fall to the ground beside him and reached for my collar with unsteady fingers. Not to take control, not to command, just to touch. "Rusty," he whispered again. "I looked for you, every day, but I wasn't right after it happened. They put me in a place, said I had memory issues, no ID, no next of kin, no records. And they didn't believe me when I said I had a dog out there. They didn't believe any of it." He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Sometimes I didn't believe it either. I rested my head on his knee. His hand trembled against my neck, tracing the edge of the collar that wasn't his. He looked up at Connor. "This isn't your dog," he said softly. "He was mine." Connor didn't answer right away. I could feel him hesitate. The tension in the leash loosened, just a fraction. Then I heard him step back. Not far, just enough. Another officer arrived, older, stockier, with a clipboard in one hand and a wary look on his face. "What's going on here?" he asked. Connor answered, "Canines refusing to engage, responding emotionally to the civilian. Civilians claiming prior ownership." "Prior?" the man scoffed. "This dog's been in service for 3 years. We've got full records, training, deployments, evaluations. He's city property." Hank didn't flinch. "Look at his tag," he said, pointing to the leash in his lap. The man squinted, stepping closer. "What?" "Look, that's his original name. Rusty, Unit 499. That was our designation." The officer picked up the tag, frowned, pulled out his phone and began snapping photos. "We'll run it," he muttered. "But don't get your hopes up. Even if he was yours, it doesn't mean he still is." Hank nodded. "I know." The man turned to Connor. "Separate them." That's when I growled, low and sharp, just once. Not out of fear or anger, but warning. The kind of growl that says, "No." Connor froze. The older officer stepped back. "Okay," he said, hands raised slightly. "Let's all take a breath." I didn't move, because I couldn't go back now. Not after that look. Not after hearing my name spoken like it mattered. Not after seeing Hank, broken, forgotten, but still trying to find me after all these years. Some part of me had waited for this. I hadn't known it, hadn't dared to believe, but it had waited. Through every patrol, every raid, every stiff command and empty crate. Some part of me had been holding my breath. And now I could finally exhale. I stayed curled against him as officers whispered, radios buzzed, and civilians stared. The sun moved behind the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. I felt Hank's hand grow still, resting in my fur. And for the first time, in a very long time, I felt still, too. Not ready to fight. Not braced for orders. Just home. I couldn't explain it in words. Not then. Not now. But the moment I stepped closer to him, and the wind carried the scent of his coat to my nose, I knew. Scent is memory for dogs. That's the truth of it. You could hide 100 faces behind makeup, scars, or years, and I'd still find the truth by smell alone. It's not just body odor or cologne. It's layers. Ash, dust, sweat, soap, skin, hope. And his scent hadn't changed. Sure, it was weaker, muted with time, a bit buried beneath the grime of the streets. But it was still there, tucked beneath everything else, the scent of desert heat, of canvas tents and MRE crumbs, of a man who once risked his life, dragging me out from under a collapsed wall, yelling my name like it was the only thing keeping him alive. That day at the park, when I stopped just short of his knees, and he whispered, "Rusty?" I breathed in, deep. And I remembered. I remembered the torn flap of the medical tent after a night patrol. I remembered the way he used to tuck his journal under his cot and whisper my name in his sleep. I remembered the time he ran through open fire just to pull me from a collapsed building. He held me against his chest, blood pouring down his leg, and kept saying over and over, "You're okay, buddy. You're okay. I got you." I didn't understand his words then, but I understood the way he shook, the way his heartbeat thumped against my side, the way he didn't let go, and I never forgot that scent. Now, years later, he smelled just the same. Under the asphalt and oil and gunmetal of the city, under the handler's scent that lingered on my gear, under the nervous sweat of the crowd, his scent reached me like a hand out of the dark, and it cracked something inside me that had been sealed shut for years. He was still whispering, voice just above a breath. "You were so small when they brought you to me. I had no clue what I was doing. But you figured it out faster than I did." His fingers traced the edge of my vest, careful not to pull. "You like those tennis balls I used to sneak you. Remember that? I got in trouble with Sergeant Mercer because I let you nap in the mess tent. You drooled on his boots, and he swore he'd have me scrubbing toilets for a week." His voice cracked a little. I didn't care. The crowd had grown. There must have been 20 people now, maybe more, circling the playground at a safe distance. Some held up phones. Others just watched with their arms crossed, unsure whether this was a breakdown or a miracle. A boy around 10 years old had snuck closer, his mother's hand latched to his shoulder. He asked quietly, "Why isn't the dog biting him?" His mother hushed him, but I wanted to answer. Because this man isn't a threat. Because this man is the only human I ever truly belonged to. Because sometimes orders don't matter. Because scent never lies. Connor hadn't spoken in a while. He just stood there, the leash slack in his hand, watching me the way you watch a machine do something it shouldn't be able to do, like it suddenly became human, like it suddenly remembered. Then another voice broke the silence. "Sir?" It was Officer Ramirez. She knelt beside Connor and whispered something into her radio, then looked over at Hank. "Can I see your ID, sir?" Hank blinked, the light from the afternoon sun glinting off his tired eyes. "I don't have one." "You don't have an ID?" "I had one," he said. "A long time ago, I think. They took it when I was transferred. Or maybe I lost it. I'm not sure anymore. I've been in a few different places." "Places?" He nodded. "Facilities, hospitals, vets' homes, couch to couch sometimes. I couldn't always remember things. Not for a while." "What's your full name?" Ramirez asked. He sat back, as if summoning the memory from somewhere deep. "Henry Doyle, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Marine Corps, Canine Handler, retired, serial number." He paused. I used to know it. I had it written down." Ramirez looked over at Connor. He gave a small shrug. She turned back to the radio and started talking again, this time quieter, more focused. I heard bits and pieces. Run records, old handler files, Unit 499, cross-check with VA database. But none of that mattered to me, because I already knew. Hank leaned back and closed his eyes, as if the weight of saying his name out loud had tired him. His hand rested on my head, and I let it. I could have pulled away, could have followed protocol, could have waited for Connor to tug the leash again, but I didn't, because the moment Hank said my name, my real name, I remembered who I was. Not the uniform body trained to chase suspects through alleyways, not the machine that obeyed shouts through a megaphone. I was Rusty, and this man was mine. He opened his eyes and looked down at me. "You still remember me, don't you, boy?" I lifted my eyes and met his, and I swear, if dogs could speak, I would have said, "I never forgot." He smiled then, a smile that didn't quite make it all the way to his eyes, but was enough to make me lean in. For a moment, the park didn't matter. The people didn't matter. The leash, the badge, the uniform, the rules, none of it mattered. There was just me and Hank. He started to cry. Not loud, not messy, just quiet tears rolling down cheeks that hadn't been touched by kindness in a long time. "I thought you were dead," he whispered. They told me you didn't make it, that you were buried after the explosion. I stopped fighting after that. I stopped asking questions." I nudged his chest with my nose. He laughed, a broken, breathless thing, and wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his coat. "You always knew when I needed it," he said, "even when I didn't know myself." His voice trembled again. "They said I made it out alone, but that was never true. You were with me. You always were." Behind us, Ramirez's voice came through the radio again. "Confirmed. We have a Henry Doyle listed as missing since 2018. Presumed dead. No active ID, but fingerprint match confirmed. VA record matches K9 handler. Assigned to a German shepherd named Rusty. Last listed as deceased." Connor blinked. Ramirez whispered, "But he's not." No one moved for a long time. Then Connor, quiet, unsure, reached for the clip on my vest. I felt the tug. The leash came off. And in that moment, I knew. I was free. But more than that, I was found. It's strange how humans think dogs forget. They say we don't have memories like they do, that we live only in the present. But they don't know what it's like to carry a scent in your chest for years. They don't know how a sound, a word, a single movement of a hand can unlock 1,000 moments buried deep in your bones. I never forgot Hank. I buried him. That's different. I was told he was gone. Not in words. No one sat me down and explained it, but I saw it in the way they stopped saying his name. In the way the crates were stacked. The way the smell of blood didn't wash out of my vest. In the way they took me away from the base without letting me sniff the tent one last time. I waited, back then. At first I waited like a dog waits at the door, thinking any second the knob will turn and everything will go back to the way it was. Then I waited like a soldier waits for orders, silent, standing still, hoping someone notices you're still there. Then I just stopped waiting. But I never stopped remembering. They gave me a new name, a new home, a new purpose, told me I was lucky to survive, that I had a gift, that I could still serve. And I did, because that's what I was trained to do. Still, there were nights. Nights when my body would twitch in dreams, and I'd hear mortars in the distance. But underneath the chaos was his voice, calling, "Rusty, come!" And I'd wake up, barking into the dark, panting, confused, tail thumping against cold walls, reaching for something that wasn't there. And now, here he was, right in front of me, not in uniform, not standing tall like he used to. He looked smaller now, faded, as if the years had weathered him down like wind to stone. But his eyes, they still carried the same fire, the same weight. I curled tighter against him on that park bench, as if I could protect him just by being near. His hand, still trembling, rested gently behind my ears, in that spot he always scratched when I did something right. "You're not supposed to be here," he whispered. "They said you died. Everyone said you died." I saw the report. K9, Rusty, presumed KIA. I believed it. I let out a low huff, the kind I used to give him when he over-explained things during training. His smile flickered. "I cried for you," he said. "You know that. Me, big bad Sergeant Doyle, crying like a kid over his dog. They thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. After the blast, everything was noise and smoke. I couldn't remember what day it was, what base we were on, or what rank I wore. But I remembered you." His voice broke, softer than a breath. "I always remembered you." The weight of it hit me hard. Not just his words, but the truth behind them. The idea that he'd been out there all this time, alive, believing I was gone, wandering, forgotten, slipping through the cracks of a system too big and too busy to look for one man and his dog. I'd moved on, or tried to, learned new commands, took down suspects, saved lives, earned medals. I'd become someone else entirely. But deep down, I think I'd always been searching for the smell of his coat. Now that I'd found it again, I wasn't going anywhere. Around us, the crowd had grown. No one spoke. They just watched. A quiet ring of strangers bearing witness to something none of them fully understood. Officer Ramirez came back over, her voice low and respectful. "We confirmed it, sir. You're Henry Doyle. Your fingerprints match. Your discharge records were closed due to presumed death after an IED blast in 2018. You were declared MIA and later listed as KIA. Hank blinked slowly, like it took a moment to understand. "I figured," he said softly. "That's what they told me, at least when they remembered I was there." Ramirez cleared her throat. "Sir, do you remember how you got to Bakersfield?" "I don't," he said. "I remember a bus. Maybe more than one. A woman at a shelter, sleeping under bridges. People giving me coffee, some ignoring me completely. It all blurs together after a while." Her voice was gentle. "And the dog? Did you recognize him immediately?" "I knew the moment he didn't bite me," Hank said, a sad little smile in his voice. "No one trains a K9 to hesitate unless you're family." He looked down at me again. "You knew, didn't you, buddy? You remembered me before I even said your name." I thumped my tail once against the bench leg. A quiet, "Yes." Officer Ramirez stepped aside to speak with Connor, who hadn't said much since he unclipped the leash. I caught bits and pieces. "Violates protocol, but the footage. City attorney will need to weigh in. But it's not every day a presumed dead veteran gets reunited with a dog also declared KIA." Connor looked pale. His grip tightened and loosened around the leash still hanging in his hand, now disconnected from me. "He disobeyed a direct command," Connor said. "He remembered someone he was never supposed to forget," Ramirez answered. "Big difference." Their words faded into the background as Hank leaned forward again, his fingers brushing the fur on my chest. "You know, Rusty, I thought I was hallucinating when I first saw you. I mean, you were bigger than I remembered, heavier in the chest. And that vest, official, clean, with a badge. You looked like you belonged to someone else." I watched him. "But then you stopped. Just like that. You were in motion, and then you weren't." Your eyes changed, like you saw through me. He reached into the duffel bag at his feet and pulled out something small, folded paper. He handed it to Ramirez, who looked at it carefully. "Old picture," she said aloud, and turned it toward Connor. It was us. Me, younger, ears too big for my head. Him with a buzz cut and a crooked grin. Sandbags behind us, a tent flap waving lazily to the side. His hand on my neck, my eyes locked on his. "That was the last photo I took before we left on that mission," Hank said. "I kept it in my pocket the whole time. When I woke up in the hospital, it was gone." Ramirez held the photo up again. "No one's going to believe this unless they see it." "I don't care who believes it," Hank said, laying a hand flat against my back. "He does." I leaned into him. I did. And if there was one thing I'd learned over the years, across countries, deployments, and lives, it was this. You can train a dog to forget commands, but you can't train him to forget love. I was trained not to cry. You don't see that in the manuals. There's no section in canine training that says, no whimpering, no whining. But it's there, unspoken. When they put the vest on you, clip the leash, line you up in front of the handlers, they're not just training you to follow commands. They're training you to be unshakable, no fear, no doubt, no hesitation, no emotion. And yet, that day in the park, as I sat with Hank's hand trembling on my back, I cried. Not loud. Not in a way that would scare anyone. Just a soft, low whine from deep in my throat. A sound I didn't even know I still had in me. The kind of sound you make when something inside you breaks loose. Not from pain, but from something else. Something deeper. Recognition. Relief. Grief. Love. There's no command for those things. No word that makes them stop or start. They just come when they're ready. I remember the moment it happened. Hank was still holding the photo Ramirez had returned to him, his fingers tracing the edges like they were sacred. He looked up at me and whispered, "You really came back to me." I let out that low whine, my head pressed into his chest. My eyes, wet without me meaning them to be, blinked against his jacket. And all around us, the world held its breath. I felt it. The stillness. The crowd, now twice the size it had been, had gone silent. Not from fear, not from confusion, but because they saw it too. They saw a dog, trained for force, for control, for obedience, break down into something simpler, something more human than human. Love, unguarded, no orders, no performance. Just me, remembering the one man who ever made me feel like more than just a badge with teeth. Somewhere behind me, someone said softly, "He's crying." Another voice whispered, "That's not supposed to happen, right?" But I didn't care what was supposed to happen, because what was happening was real. I remember Hank's breath catching in his throat. He pulled me a little closer, wrapped both arms around my neck, and rested his chin against my head. "I thought I'd never get to see you again," he said. "Not after what they told me." His voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. "I thought they buried you." He paused, then chuckled. Not out of humor, but the kind of laugh that leaks through pain. "Guess we were both buried in our own ways, huh?" I didn't move. Just stayed there, letting his warmth anchor me, letting myself feel something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Even the officers stopped moving. Connor hadn't said a word since removing my leash. He stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching. Not angry anymore. Not confused either. Just quiet. Like he knew something bigger than any of us had walked into the park that day. Eventually, someone from the command unit arrived. A tall man in plain clothes, a badge clipped to his belt, phone already in hand. He spoke with Ramirez in hushed tones, occasionally glancing over at us. I saw him point to the photo, then to me, then to Hank. Ramirez nodded slowly, her face unreadable. The man approached Hank carefully, crouching down to eye level. "Mr. Doyle," he said, his voice steady but not unkind. "I'm Deputy Chief Martin. We're trying to figure out what happens next. I hope you understand. This is unprecedented." Hank nodded. "I figured." Martin looked at me. "This dog, Rusty, is still technically a working K9. He's registered to the city of Bakersfield, assigned to Officer Blake. He's part of active investigations. Protocol says he's property of the department." "I understand," Hank said. "But after reviewing the video, and this photograph, and your service record, which we've just had pulled from federal archives..." He paused, choosing his words. "It's clear something significant has happened here, something we didn't expect." Hank smiled faintly. "Most of my life's been things people didn't expect." Martin chuckled under his breath. "Ain't that the truth?" He looked at me again. I met his eyes, just briefly, enough to let him see I wasn't confused, that I wasn't disoriented or malfunctioning. I had made a choice, and I would stand by it. Martin stood. "I'm going to make some calls," he said. "There'll be questions, a lot of them. But for now, he stays with you. I won't be the guy who tears this apart." "Thank you," Hank said, his voice tight. Martin hesitated. "I served too," he said softly. "Navy, Iraq, 04. Lost a buddy over there. Not a dog, a man. But I still dream about him. If I could hug him again, I would. So, yeah, you two stay put." And just like that, the tension began to melt. Connor stepped forward, finally. He didn't say much, just crouched beside me, ran his hand down my back once, slow, firm, then nodded to Hank. "I didn't know," he said. "You couldn't have," Hank replied. Connor stood. "He's not mine anymore, is he?" Hank looked down at me. "He never stopped being mine. But he was yours too." Connor gave a half smile. "He was always different. Quiet. Focused. Never got riled up like the others." He looked at me again. Now I know why. We watched him walk away, back toward the line of patrol cars and blinking lights at the edge of the park. I felt no regret, no guilt, just gratitude. Hank sighed beside me. "I don't know what happens after this." I leaned into him a little more. Neither did I. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to know. Because I wasn't following a handler anymore. I wasn't chasing a command. I was home. And in that moment, surrounded by strangers, uniforms, and the soft whisper of wind in the trees, I cried. And nobody told me not to. There are moments in a dog's life that feel bigger than they should. Not because of the noise or the chaos, but because of the silence that settles right after. That long, impossible quiet that tells you something important just happened, and everything from here on out will be different. That moment came the second I felt the leash slip off. Connor didn't make a scene. He didn't throw the leash or stomp away. He just unclipped it, quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. His fingers hovered near the clasp for a second longer than necessary. Then they let go, and he stood there, still, like he didn't know what he was supposed to do next. I stayed close to Hank, curled at his feet, with my head on his boot, the weight of the day sinking into my bones. The sun had lowered behind the trees, casting the park in long shadows. The air had cooled just enough for breath to hang visible for a second before vanishing. I glanced up at Connor. His eyes were fixed on me, but not the way he used to look at me on patrol, not with expectation or authority. There was something else now, something I hadn't seen from him before. Loss. He didn't speak right away, didn't move either. I think in that moment, he realized something I had already known the second Hank said my name. I wasn't his anymore. Maybe I never truly was. You see, humans believe they can own dogs. They name us, feed us, train us. They put tags around our necks and call us theirs. But true loyalty, the kind that sinks into your marrow, that isn't something you assign. It's something you earn. And once given, it doesn't shift just because someone else holds the leash. Connor had been good to me. He never mistreated me. He kept me safe, kept me working. But what we had was duty. What I had with Hank was home. Finally, after what felt like an hour inside a minute, Connor walked over. He didn't kneel this time, just stood beside Hank's bench, hands in his pockets. He was always sharp, he said quietly. First in, last out, never hesitated. Hank looked up at him. He's still sharp. Connor nodded slowly. Yeah, I see that now. They stood there like that, two men on opposite sides of the same dog, both trying to understand what had just happened, both trying to find a place for their hands when the rules didn't cover this. I didn't know about you, Connor said, glancing at Hank. When I got him, all the file said was recovered after overseas service. No handler listed, just a number. That sounds about right, Hank replied, his voice dry. They lost track of me somewhere between Kabul and Kansas. Connor smiled faintly. Well, I guess they found you now. Ramirez joined them, clipboard in hand, her voice low but firm. They're sending someone from the VA. They want to talk to you, Sergeant Doyle. See about verifying more records, getting you some help. I don't need help, Hank muttered. You do, she said gently, but not the kind you think. They're not here to take him. No one's trying to separate you. We're just trying to make this right. Hank looked down at me. I looked up at him. I've waited a long time for something to feel right again, he said. I nudged his hand with my nose. He scratched behind my ear like he used to. And I swear, for just a second, the years between us fell away. Then a familiar sound cracked the air, a round of applause. Scattered, hesitant at first, but then it grew, from one corner of the park, then another. People clapping, wiping their faces, smiling through tears. Some had phones up, recording. Others just stood there, hands over hearts, like they were watching something sacred. A child's voice carried over the noise. Mom, look, he came back to his best friend. That got me. That little voice, full of truth and wonder, cracked open something soft inside my chest. I don't know how humans carry that much emotion in such small bodies, but they do. I felt Hank's hand tighten on my back. You hear that? He whispered. They know. They all know. And somehow it didn't matter that we were surrounded by officers, or that every move was being filmed, or that my badge still technically hung from a precinct locker across town. Because in that moment, I wasn't a canine unit. I was just a dog who came home. Martin returned, the plainclothes officer from earlier, phone still pressed to his ear. He nodded at Hank, then at Connor. "Gentlemen," he said, slipping the phone back into his coat. "The chief says, if we try to take that dog from this man, we'll have a public relations disaster so big the mayor won't get re-elected." Hank chuckled. "Didn't know I had that kind of power." "You don't," Martin said. "But he does." He pointed at me. "People saw what happened today. They're not going to forget it." Connor looked over at me. "Neither will I." I watched him for a while, trying to read his posture, his eyes, the weight in his shoulders. Eventually he spoke again. "You were never just a tool," he said. "You were something else. Something I couldn't name, maybe didn't earn, but I see it now." He turned to Hank. "He chose you." Hank didn't gloat, didn't say, "I know." He just nodded. "I chose him too." Martin stepped forward, voice more official now. "We're arranging transport to a veterans facility, safe housing, medical evaluation. Rusty will stay with you. He's been unofficially retired, effective immediately." Hank raised an eyebrow. "Unofficially?" Martin shrugged. "We'll take care of the paperwork later." That was the end of it. No courtroom, no signatures, no lawyers, just a choice. Made in front of God, strangers, and half a dozen smartphones, a dog and a man, reunited in a place they were never supposed to meet again. As the sun sank behind the trees and the sirens shut off and the crowd began to thin, I laid my head on Hank's lap one more time. I could still feel Connor's eyes on me. I lifted my head, looked at him, and gave one slow wag of my tail. He nodded. Then he turned and walked away. And that, I think, was his way of saying goodbye. I was trained to bite on command. That's what I was built for. It's in the way my muscles twitch when I hear a shout, the way my mind sharpens when I see someone run. They spent years teaching me where to aim, how to hold, how to release. It became instinct, sharpened into precision, like a switch that could be flipped without hesitation. But that day in the park, as the air thickened with tension and the leash pulled tight between Connor's hand and my collar, something inside me refused to flip. I couldn't bite him, not Hank. He was sitting there, shoulders slumped, legs trembling, his duffel bag at his feet like it carried the last pieces of a life no one else remembered. But I did. I remembered every thread of that bag, every sound of that voice, every scar on the hands that once held me back from explosions and gunfire and fear. When Connor yelled the command, my body started to move. Years of training don't vanish in a second. But somewhere between the lunge and the target, I stopped. I saw Hank's face. Not the face of a suspect, not the face of someone hiding a weapon or threatening a crowd, but the face of a man who had once pulled me from rubble while bleeding from his own leg. The face of a man who used to sneak jerky from his MRE just so I could have a little more protein after a hard day. The man who talked to me like I was something sacred, who named me Rusty. That kind of bond doesn't go away, not even under orders. So when I froze, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't failure. It was the clearest decision I'd ever made. I remember the way people gasped, the way Connor yanked on the leash, expecting me to obey, the way Ramirez moved her hand toward her sidearm out of reflex, not because she feared me, but because she couldn't understand why I wasn't doing what I was told. But I just stood there. Then I took a step back, then another. My ears dropped, my tail lowered, not out of submission, but out of awe. Like my body knew it was standing in front of something holy. He whispered my name. Rusty. It hit me like a thunderclap. You don't forget your name. Not when it's spoken like that. Not when it carries the weight of someone who never stopped hoping you'd come back. My paws moved on their own. I stepped toward him. Slowly, cautiously. He didn't flinch. He didn't reach for me like most people would. Hands out, palms wide. He just sat there, letting me come to him, as if he understood I had to make that choice on my own. And I did. I pressed my nose into his chest. He smelled like dust, and cold nights, and leather worn thin. But underneath it all, there was still that faint trace of him, the scent that used to mean safety in the middle of a battlefield. I let out a low whine. He wrapped his arms around me, and that was it. Everything changed. Connor didn't say a word. Ramirez just radioed in quietly, her voice low and reverent. The other officers stood back. No one drew weapons. No one gave more orders. They understood, even if they didn't have the words for it. They saw a dog defy his programming, not out of rebellion, but out of something older, something truer, loyalty and love. I had obeyed every command they ever gave me. I'd chased down suspects in the rain, sniffed out weapons in abandoned cars, stood in riot lines with my teeth bared and my heart steady. But I couldn't bite him. Because how do you turn on someone who once carried you through fire? How do you sink your teeth into the man who whispered your name when he thought no one else would ever say it again? How do you attack your home? Later, I'd hear people use words like miracle, divine intervention, once in a lifetime. They said it was the bond between soldier and dog, something science couldn't fully explain. They said I remembered, but it was more than that. I chose. That was the part they couldn't quite process, that the choice had been mine. I wasn't malfunctioning. I wasn't confused. I was sure. And for the first time since I'd lost Hank in that desert, I knew exactly who I was. I was Rusty. I was his. And I was never going to bite the only human in this world who ever made me feel like more than just a weapon. After the crowd cleared and the lights dimmed, Martin approached us with a stack of papers and a soft look in his eyes. "We need to get him somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere quiet. Somewhere you both can breathe." Hank nodded. "We'd like that." Martin looked at me, then back at Hank. "You're not under arrest. You're not trespassing. You're just back. And I think the world needs a minute to catch up to that." I let Hank clip my old leash to my vest, not because I needed to be led, but because it felt right, like we were picking up a walk that had been paused for too long. We walked out of that park side by side. No sirens, no spotlight. Just two silhouettes in the setting sun, a man who had been forgotten, and a dog who remembered. And in the stillness of that moment, I realized something simple and profound. Out of all the people they trained me to subdue, out of all the drills and takedowns and scenarios I'd run, he was the only one I couldn't bite, because he was never the enemy. He was the reason I became who I am. They said I broke protocol. They said what happened at the park wasn't part of any manual, that dogs like me weren't supposed to think, to hesitate, to choose. But I did, and it wasn't confusion. It wasn't hesitation. It was the clearest I had felt in years. It was a choice. And it came from the one place they never trained me to use: my heart. After the crowd thinned, after the camera phones dropped, and the officers returned to their cruisers, it was just me and Hank again. The park had quieted. The swings swayed in the breeze, empty now, their chains clicking softly in rhythm with the wind. A blanket had been brought by someone. A stranger, I think. They'd left it folded on the bench beside us. Ramirez had helped Hank ease himself down onto the grass, his knees stiff and voice tight with pain. He winced as he moved, his fingers brushing the old leather leash coiled on the ground next to me. I lay beside him, my side pressed against his hip, my head resting in the crook of his arm. We didn't talk much. He didn't need to say anything. He just breathed. And so did I. It felt like after the storm. That silence that settles over a battlefield once the shooting stops. No more adrenaline. No more yelling. Just you and the person who made it through beside you. He scratched behind my ears, slow and steady. I didn't think they'd let me keep you, he whispered, more to himself than to me. I blinked up at him. They said you were city property, that you had duties, that there were rules. He looked at the badge still stitched to my vest, the one that didn't feel like mine anymore. But you chose me, he said, his voice breaking. You could have attacked me. You could have walked away. But you didn't. He pressed his forehead to mine. You came back. And I had. Not out of instinct. Not out of command. But because deep down, some part of me had never stopped waiting for him. That night, they brought us to a small hotel near the edge of town. Ramirez had arranged it. Said it wasn't much, but it was quiet, and the department would cover the cost until something more permanent could be arranged. Hank hadn't slept in a real bed in weeks, maybe months. He didn't say so, but I could see it in the way he moved, the way his hands shook when he took off his coat, the way he stood for a long time just staring at the bed, like it might disappear. I curled up beside it, watching him as he finally lay down, the blanket pulled up to his chest. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His breathing slowed, and for the first time in years, I heard the sound I thought I'd never hear again. Him snoring softly, with one hand hanging down off the mattress, resting lightly on my back. I didn't sleep. Not at first. I just stayed there, watching him, listening to the hum of the heater, the quiet buzz of a TV down the hall. I was off duty now, unleashed, unassigned. But more than that, I was free. Free to remember. Free to choose. And I chose him. The next morning, the sun poured through the curtain, lighting the room in a soft golden wash. Hank stirred, groaning as he sat up. "Still here, huh?" he asked me. I thumped my tail once against the floor. He smiled. Guess I didn't dream it after all. There were knocks on the door. Paperwork, questions. A visit from a caseworker from the Department of Veterans Affairs. She spoke softly, with that cautious tone people use when they're not sure what someone remembers and what they've lost. Hank was sharper than they expected. Maybe sharper than he'd been in years. He told them everything. Dates, units, places, my name. They listened. They nodded. They took notes. Then came the question I'd been waiting for. The one that made everything real. "What do you want to happen next, Mr. Doyle?" Hank didn't hesitate. "I want to go somewhere quiet. Somewhere we won't be forgotten again. And I want him with me." The woman nodded. "We can make that happen." And just like that, the future began to take shape. Not with grand declarations or ceremonies. Just a man reclaiming the only thing he'd ever truly needed. And a dog who had already made his choice. That afternoon, as we waited in the lobby of the VA's temporary housing office, a man approached us. Another veteran, judging by his cap and the limp in his walk. He knelt beside me, looking between Hank and me. "I saw the video," he said. "Made me cry." Hank nodded politely, unsure what to say. The man reached out, scratching under my chin. "I had a canine partner once too," he said. "Didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Watching you two. Brought him back, just for a moment." Hank swallowed hard. "I know what that feels like." The man stood, patting Hank on the shoulder. "You chose each other," he said. "That matters. That means more than most people will ever understand." And he was right. Because in the end, none of this had been about policy, or paperwork, or who wore the badge. It was about a bond forged long before the city ever put a number on my tag. It was about a choice, made by a heart that remembered, even when the world forgot. They called it a miracle. They called it a story. But to me, it was just coming home. And I would choose him again, every time. The day they said it out loud, I didn't fully understand what it meant, not at first. "We're retiring the dog from active duty," the man from the city said, flipping through a folder he barely looked at. "Effective immediately." He stood in a small room, one of those bare conference spaces that smelled like paper and coffee and old carpet. Ramirez was there, sitting off to the side, her arms folded across her chest. Connor wasn't. I don't know if that was his choice or someone else's, but I remember noticing his absence like a missing boot on a rack. The man, a department liaison, I think, tapped the folder. "Legally, we'll process the forms this week. Badge number reassigned. Vest retired. From today forward, the department relinquishes ownership of Canine Rex, or, as Mr. Doyle insists, Rusty." He looked up at Hank then, eyes a little unsure, a little guarded. "You understand what that means, sir?" Hank nodded. "Yeah. It means I finally get to take him home." He didn't say it with pride. He said it with a kind of quiet reverence, like it wasn't a win, but a restoration, like something had been put back in its rightful place. The liaison slid a pen across the table. "Then all that's left is your signature." Hank reached for it, his fingers a little stiff, a little shaky. It took him 2 tries to get the pen to sit right between his knuckles. He signed. The liaison stood, gathered his things, and gave us a nod. And just like that, it was official. I was no longer a working canine, no longer government property, no longer someone else's responsibility. On paper, I was retired. But the truth, I had already been free the moment Hank whispered my name. That kind of freedom doesn't come from ink or folders or badge numbers. It comes from something deeper, something no paperwork can touch. It comes from being remembered. After the meeting, we stepped out into the late afternoon sun. Hank took a deep breath, his face tilted toward the sky. "You smell that?" he asked me. I sniffed the air. Warm asphalt, a faint scent of jasmine from a nearby bush, the distant hum of a bakery. He chuckled. "Smells like a second chance." We didn't talk much as we walked to the car. The VA had assigned us a transport, just a regular sedan, no markings. The driver opened the back door for Hank, then walked around to the front without saying a word. He'd been briefed, I suppose, told what happened, told not to ask questions. I jumped into the back seat beside Hank and lay down with my head on his thigh. We drove for a long time. Out of the city, past the gas stations and strip malls, into the quiet part of the county, where the air softened and the trees grew closer to the road. The sky turned the color of peaches and faded denim, and the wind smelled like dry grass and peace. We arrived at a small assisted living facility tucked behind a grove of oak trees. It wasn't fancy. One story, clean siding, a wide porch with a rocking chair that creaked when the breeze pushed through. Hank stared at it for a long while before stepping out of the car. "This is it," he murmured. The nurse who met us, a woman named Teresa, greeted Hank with a smile that felt genuine. "We've been expecting you, Mr. Doyle. Room's ready. And don't worry, pets are more than welcome here. In fact, you're not the only one with a four-legged friend inside." Hank smiled. "He's not a pet." She nodded. "I understand." They had a room at the back, quiet, with a window that looked out over a little patch of green where sunlight scattered through the trees. They'd even put a dog bed near the dresser, though I ignored it and claimed the rug at the side of Hank's bed instead. That first night, the place was quiet in a different way than the hotel. The walls didn't hum, the lights didn't buzz. There was only the slow creak of someone walking down the hall, the occasional rustle of blankets, the soft clink of ceramic from the kitchen. Hank sat in a chair by the window with a cup of tea, his fingers loose around the handle. I rested beside him. "You know," he said, voice just above a whisper, "they used to tell me I talked about you in my sleep." I lifted my head. "Back at the first hospital. Then the second. They said I kept calling your name at night. Rusty, Rusty, over and over. I don't remember it." He paused. "But maybe some part of me always did." I leaned my head against his leg. He smiled. "I think you're the only thing I ever finished," he said. "Started with you, and somehow I got to finish with you too." Later that week, the collar came in the mail. Ramirez had it made. Black leather, hand-stitched, with a polished brass plate on the side. "Rusty K9 Unit 419 forever." Hank held it in both hands, reading the plate like it held a prayer. "You mind wearing it?" he asked. I pressed my head into his chest. That was all the answer he needed. He slipped it over my neck, his hands steady this time. That night, I slept beside his bed, the moonlight casting a silver trail across the floor. And in my dreams, I didn't run. I didn't chase or track or bite. I just stood beside him, like I always had. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. That was freedom, not retirement, not reassignment. Just the quiet knowing that I had finally come back to where I belonged. And no paper, no badge, no title could have made that more real. There's something strange about silence when it's the right kind. When I was working, silence meant tension. It meant something was wrong, that a door was about to fly open, or a man was about to run. I learned to listen to silence the way others listen to alarms. I could smell panic behind quiet, hear a lie in the stillness of a room. But the silence in our new home wasn't like that. It was a soft kind of quiet, the kind that wrapped around you like a worn blanket, that didn't demand attention or action, the kind that gave you space to just be. I didn't know how much I'd missed that until I had it again. Hank and I had been at the veterans community for a few weeks when it finally hit me. We were safe. No leashes, no sirens, no drills or shift changes or hard pavement under my paws. Just the slow rhythm of our own days. We lived in a modest unit tucked at the back of the complex. It had a little porch where Hank sat most mornings, a kitchenette that always smelled like toast, and a patch of fenced yard that backed up to a stand of whispering trees. The other residents called it the Cove. It felt like the kind of place stories came to rest. Hank had a chair by the window and a habit of reading the paper, even when the words didn't always stick. I had a spot under the side table where the morning sun pooled just right. Sometimes we sat there for hours, saying nothing at all. But in that nothing, there was everything. The staff loved me. Teresa, the head nurse, kept biscuits in her scrubs pocket. Marvin, a former Navy radio tech who walked with 2 canes, always brought me a corner of his sandwich. The neighbors learned my name, my real one. No one called me K9 anymore. Not even by accident, just Rusty. And every time someone said it, I felt like I belonged a little more. One morning, Hank leaned down with a wheeze in his ribs and brushed his hand across the tag on my collar. "Funny, isn't it?" he said. "I gave you that name before I knew what you'd mean to me. Before either of us had been shot at or blown up or told we didn't exist anymore." He scratched the soft patch beneath my chin. And here we are, still Rusty and Hank. He looked toward the yard, still standing. We had a routine, simple and slow. Breakfast by the window, a walk around the trail behind the complex, rest on the porch while the wind rattled the leaves. Sometimes other veterans would stop by to sit with us. Some brought their own dogs, retired service animals with graying snouts and tired hips. We didn't talk much, just shared space. Let the quiet be enough. But not every day was easy. Hank still had rough nights. Some days he'd sit too long in his chair, eyes far off, lips pressed in a tight line. I could hear his breathing change, see his shoulders stiffen. That old war lived in his bones. When that happened, I'd nudge his hand. Sometimes he'd respond right away. Other times it took a while. But eventually, he'd come back to me. "You're still watching over me," he'd say, "even after all this time." I was, because some jobs don't end with retirement. One evening, after a visit from a social worker checking in on Hank's medication, we sat on the porch while the sun bled across the sky in streaks of orange and lavender. "You know," Hank said, his voice low and slow, "when I first woke up in that hospital, after the blast, I kept asking about you. They said there was no record of a dog on my team, that I must have imagined you. Just trauma messing with my head." He rubbed his temples. "Eventually, I believed them. What else could I do?" He looked down at me, eyes rimmed with quiet grief. "But you never stopped looking for me, did you?" I nudged his knee with my nose. He smiled. "I didn't think I deserved a second chance," he whispered. "But somehow, you found me anyway." I didn't understand all his words, but I knew the shape of his voice, the ache in it, and I stayed close, because that's what I was built for. Not the chase, not the takedown, not the medals, or the photos, or the parades. I was built to stay. In the days that followed, life didn't get dramatic. It didn't twist or turn. It just settled. In the best way. Kids from the neighborhood sometimes wandered into the yard, offering sticks or balls or half-eaten sandwiches. I let them touch my ears, tug my tail gently, ask their questions. Hank would wave from the porch, answering the ones I couldn't. He was a real war dog, he'd say. Did more for this country than most folks'll ever know. I didn't care for the title. I just wanted to be beside him. The VA helped Hank get his first full medical checkup in nearly 10 years. They gave him new meds, fresh clothes, glasses that didn't slide off his nose. They even helped clean his duffel bag. the one he'd carried all this time. Inside it, they found the old photo of us again. It hung above his bed now, in a frame donated by one of the staff. Me, with a crooked ear. Him, with sand on his boots and sunburn on his cheeks. Both of us looking straight at the camera like we had no idea how much would be taken from us or how much we'd one day get back. Hank started writing again. Little notes at first, scribbles in a notebook, then short letters addressed to no one in particular. Sometimes he'd read them aloud while I lay nearby, listening. This one's to the guy who picked up my tag after the blast. If you're out there, thank you for not forgetting I existed. Or, this one's to the nurse who let me sleep an extra hour that day in San Diego. I don't remember your name, but I remember your kindness. And then, one night, this one's to my dog, for not forgetting who I was, even when I did. He closed the notebook after that one. Didn't say anything else, but he didn't need to, because in that little house, with the porch that creaked and the photo that faded in the sun, we had everything we needed. No commands, no missions, no leash, just Rusty and Hank, still standing. The wind moves differently now. It's slower, softer, like it's careful not to stir too much, as if it knows that this place, this time in our lives, is delicate, precious. I lie on the porch each morning, belly against the warm wood, listening to the trees hum and watching the shadows shift across Hank's slippers. He sits just behind me, his legs wrapped in a blanket someone crocheted last winter. His hands move slower these days. His cough is more persistent. But when he says my name, Rusty, his voice still holds the weight of all the years we've carried, and I still come, every time. I think he worries I'll forget. Some days when his thoughts don't line up as easily as they used to, he says it twice in a row, like he's making sure I remember who I am. But I do. I always have. Even when they took me away, changed my name, wrapped my chest in vests and patches and numbers. Underneath all of that, I was still his, still Rusty. Still the dog who slept at the foot of his cot in Kandahar, ears twitching in rhythm with his breath. Now I sleep beside his recliner. Same position, same ears, different war, a quieter one. Some nights, I hear him mumble in his sleep. Names, places, commands that never made it home. And when his breathing quickens, I nudge his hand with my nose, just like I used to. He doesn't always wake, but he settles, and that's enough. It's strange, being this far from the life we once knew. The missions, the drills, the violence, they feel like another lifetime now, like echoes in someone else's story. But they're still part of me. I carry them in my pores, in the scars beneath my fur, in the dreams that sometimes find me when the nights stretch too long. But mostly, I carry the memory of Hank's hand on my neck, guiding me, trusting me, loving me. A few weeks ago, we had visitors, reporters, camera crews. Someone had found the old footage, the clip from the park, the moment I refused to bite, the reunion. It went viral again, for the second time. They wanted to tell the story all over. Interview Hank, ask about what it meant. They came with microphones and questions. Hank just smiled and pointed at me. He remembered me, he said. That's the whole story. And he was right. Because everything that followed, the paperwork, the retirement, the small house and the collar with my name, All of it began with that one truth. I remembered. A few kids from the local school came by last Friday. They brought Hank a poster they'd made. Drawings of us, hearts and flags and paw prints scrawled across butcher paper in crayon. One of them, a girl with big glasses and 2 missing teeth, knelt beside me and whispered, "You're the bravest dog in the whole world." I wanted to tell her I'm not. I was scared plenty of times. There were days in the field when the air crackled with fear, when the scent of blood made my legs lock up, when I barked just to hear my own voice steady. But I had Hank. He was never the loudest man in the unit, never barked orders or strutted like some of the younger handlers, but he had this way of being steady, like a tree in a storm, like something you could lean on when the world shifted beneath you. And that's what I did. Now, all these years later, he leans on me. Not physically, not always, but in the quiet moments, in the pauses between heartbeats, when the past feels closer than the present. That's when he reaches out. And I'm always there. We had a scare last month. Hank slipped in the kitchen, hit his head on the corner of the table. I barked until someone came. Teresa, thank God. They rushed him to the clinic. He was out cold for what felt like days. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just waited. When they finally brought him back, pale and slow and stitched behind the ear, he looked at me from the wheelchair and said, "You didn't forget me, did you, boy?" I rested my head on his lap. He cried into my fur. Since then, we've moved even slower. But that's okay. The world doesn't feel so rushed anymore. We've earned the quiet. Each morning, Hank still rises with the sun, still makes coffee, even if he forgets to drink it. Still shuffles to the porch with me padding behind him like I always have. And every now and then, he turns to me and says, "We did good, didn't we?" I thump my tail against the wood. Because we did. We survived the worst of it. We found each other again. And we made it home. Not everyone gets that. A lot of dogs I knew didn't come back. A lot of men, too. Their names aren't always carved in marble. Sometimes they're just carried in the breath of someone who remembers. I remember. I remember all of it. The desert. The smell of his jacket. The first time he called me partner. The last time I saw his boots before the blast. The way his voice cracked when he said my name in that park. I remember the leash dropping. I remember choosing. I remember the porch light flickering on the night we came home for good. Now, as I lie beside him, his fingers resting in my fur, I know what's coming. We don't talk about it. Not directly. But he knows. And so do I. He's not afraid. Neither am I. One day, the sun will rise, and he won't. And I'll be here, still, waiting, remembering, carrying the sound of his voice in the spaces between breaths. But until then, we sit on the porch. We let the wind move gently around us. We hold each other in the silence that only those who have come through fire together can understand. And if anyone asks who we are, I'll lift my head, wag my tail, and tell them, I'm Rusty, I'm his, and I'm still here. If you're still here, thank you for walking with me through this story. It wasn't always easy to remember, but sometimes remembering is the only way to heal. If you've ever had someone you loved come back to you, or if you're still waiting for them, just type 1 in the comments. You don't have to explain. I'll know what you mean. And if my story found a place in your heart, maybe you'd consider staying for the next one. I've got more to tell, so go ahead. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. I'll be right here. Same porch, same wind. Still remembering.